little bit of murder in the morning, right before the coffee gets pouring. Someone let the Lord in. This ain't a nursery rhyme, baby, this is a warning. To me, like I was a president. To me, like you're never gonna speak again. To me, and make it so beautiful. Keep me here to make me late to my funeral. Murder, you got me listening to murder pop. I'm facing murder, sipping your words from a champagne cup. I'm screaming murder, eyes closed with my hands up. I'm yelling murder pop, pop to pop, yeah, yeah. Big hooks, big lips, now I'm tingling off for big hips. You want bullets? Give up a kiss. You want attention? She got whips. You know why there's fire in your eardrums, keyboard hot sauce in her shotgun. Bang, bang, biggity, bang, da bang. There are bullets on her tongue, there are bullets on her tongue. Bang, bang, biggity, bang, da bang. Her mouth is a gun, her mouth is a gun. Murder, you got me listening to murder pop. I'm facing murder, sipping your words from a champagne cup. I'm screaming murder, eyes closed with my hands up. I'm yelling murder pop, pop to pop, yeah, yeah. You got me listening to murder pop. I'm facing murder, sipping your words from a champagne cup. I'm screaming murder, eyes closed with my hands up. I'm yelling murder pop to pop, yeah, yeah.
Hey, I'm Jade. I'm music director and host at The Current, and we are so excited to welcome you to LineCheck. This is a series of virtual conversations with Minnesota's music community. And just thank you to Mayda for kicking everything off for us tonight. And stay tuned because we're going to get another song from Mayda coming up a little bit later. But I wanted to introduce you to LineCheck, which is a new series from The Current. And we hope that this is just the beginning. It's experts from around the state and sometimes beyond gathering together to discuss topics including the music economy, mental health, and activism in music. And each of these topics, right, they deserve an extended discussion, which is probably more than the panel can possibly get to in this 1 hour conversation. But it's a start. And we want to keep these important conversations going into the future to make sure that our music scene comes back even stronger than it was before. So I am extremely excited to introduce tonight's panel on supporting safe music spaces in Minnesota. The conversation is going to be led by musician, activist, and author Shawna Potter. Shawna is the front person of the feminist punk band War on Women and literally wrote the book on making spaces safer. She's joined by a panel of experts from around the Minnesota music community. And we'll start with Ro Lorenzen. Ro is a sound engineer, a musician, and a teacher at her company, Rotoscope Recordings. She's been a member of Greater Twin Cities Youth Symphonies, the Minnesota State Choir, and electro funk collective Static Panic. Ro developed the Minnesota Black Musician Support Network and is a volunteer with the Safer Spaces Initiative, representing musicians and venues across the metro. We also have Ryan Kroening, and Ryan is the founder and president of Events by Lady K. That's a Minneapolis-based company that partners with clients to create events where every attendee feels welcomed and celebrated and included. Ryan has more than 15 years of experience planning events across the country and serves on the board of Amazeworks and plays French horn with the City of Lakes Community Band. We also have Kimmy and Shannon Blowtorch. They're the co-owners of Sequeerity, a queer POC-owned security company with the goal to create and maintain a safe space for everybody, especially the LGBTQIA+ BIPOC community. Sequeerity also are licensed permit to carry instructors. And just a heads up that there's going to be an audience Q&A towards the end of the conversation. So please feel free to toss your questions for the panel into the Q&A box during the webinar. In fact, if you have a question right now, you can toss it in there and test it out. There's also an option to submit the questions anonymously if you feel more comfortable with that. And LineCheck is made possible in part by the Minnesota Legacy Amendments Art and Cultural Heritage Fund and by the members of Minnesota Public Radio. So let's do this and kick off tonight's event. I'm going to turn things right on over to Shawna Potter.
Thank you so much, Jade. Thank you so much to the Current for holding space for this conversation. I really appreciate this panel is part of a series, right? Not just a one-off. It allows us to go a little deeper on the subject of safer spaces. And before we continue, I'd like to acknowledge that I am sitting on stolen land here in so-called Baltimore, that this is the ancestral homeland of the Piscataway people. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders and past and present citizens of all the Piscataway tribes. From Me Too to Black Lives Matter, to It Gets Better, to Stop Asian Hate, just to name a few. The last few years have put social justice movements front and center in people's consciousness in ways that are unique and undeniable. These ideas are not new, these struggles are not new, but thanks to this newly urgent awareness, I know I'm conducting more safer space and bystander intervention trainings than ever. It's clear that the average person knows there's a problem and they just want to know how to help. And sometimes jumping right into asking, okay, so what do I do? And I think a lot of people listening might be asking that same question. So that's where I want to start. Sometimes when people ask, okay, but what do I do? What do you want me to do? I think they're skipping a few steps. And I'd like to know, Kimmy, do you find that to be true? And if so, what should people be doing before they jump into action?
I don't know if it would be necessarily, I wouldn't call it missing a few steps. I would call it more lack of knowledge or quite honestly, situational awareness. That's a term that is new to a lot of people, but is probably going to be the best technique and tactic to use for anybody doing anything, quite honestly, especially if you're in a setting like that, in a music or a venue of any sort. Being aware of your surroundings, knowing the triggers or knowing certain behaviors, et cetera, and then knowing who you can go to with those concerns. I mean, it's going to be different from, say, a guest at the venue seeing something and going up to security or somebody who can actually go over and handle it. And then on the security side of it, you have to look at the logistics, the legalities of it, and what you can and can't actually do. And so that's where I think a lot of times it's going to be coming from outside of the box thinking. The best way really is to be aware and then have follow through, I guess. Because even if you can't do something, if you can't you can't go on a gut feeling from a guest, but you can validate that guest by being more aware of this person, of that situation, and then keep an eye on it so that if you see something beginning to escalate, you move in quicker rather than let something escalate and then react to it. You want to be proactive.
Ryan, would you say that sort of self-awareness, that education, maybe, learning, maybe having just a little bit more cultural competency before we jump into action? Would you say that's true, that's necessary?
I would. I totally agree. I think there is an element, like Kimmy said, the lack of awareness, but it's often about ourselves. So I think there's a lot of work to do around analyzing our own biases, our own privilege. What are we aware of and what don't we see? What don't we notice? right? Like in our work, I like to talk about it as the platinum rule instead of the golden rule, right? The golden rule is treat others like you want to be treated, but that doesn't apply across all contexts, across all identities, because it's based on me and my experiences and my perspective. And so the platinum rule is treat others as they want to be treated. And you learn how to do that through relationship building, through asking questions, through investigation, in a genuine way. And so I think, you know, my response to, but what do I do, is get to know yourself, but then get to know others that you're trying to serve, right? In our world, it's planning events on behalf of clients, but trying to meet the needs of a big range of attendees. And I think in the entertainment, in the venue world, in the music world, you don't always know who's coming through the doors. And I think applying another jargon term, but we call it universal design. So how do you center the most marginalized people at the core of a process and create from there? So how does your venue already have a ramp to support accessibility? How do you just bake in an all gender restroom in terms of taking action, making people feel safer, more welcome, celebrated, and included?
I love that. I often tell people, if you assume that anyone will show up and you actually plan for it, then anyone can show up. Then everyone will feel welcome. So I've been thinking a lot lately about anger, this idea keeps coming back to me that it creates the fire necessary for folks like us to try to make the world better, right? But it might help us start something. Even though it can help us start something, it often prevents us from sustaining something, from growing something. It can often just get in our way and no longer serve us. And I'm just curious, what role has anger played in everyone's personal journeys into activism? And is it different now than when you began? This is open to everyone. And I'd like to hear from, let's say, Ro.
So I had like a couple of points to this, because realistically, I've been doing full-time freelance production work for a year now. And, you know, the summer of 2020 was a lot for a lot of people, especially in our community. And at the same time, I was also building a business model that best served to essentially like make my emotional creative energy pay my rent, be self-sustaining, and you know, run a studio business in the midst of a pandemic, which seems kind of like a daunting task, right? So being the sole advocate for my needs when it came to like being my own boss, being my own manager, I started to find that I wasn't having my spiritual, physical, financial needs met, and I needed to be deeply reassessing those. You know, like the reassessment of that was really, you know, earth-shaking for me in the ways that I, you know, was kind of running this business while there were reports of white supremacists like hiding chemicals in people's lawns and starting fires in my neighborhood. And like people that I loved and trusted, you know, my friends and creative professionals, both sharing their stories of harm as well as being accused of harm, and finding ways to you know, feel that through in terms of how I can be there to support both sides of my community as a whole. And you know, I started to experience this backpedaling as I kind of became more into my own person. The like understanding of several of the folks around me in terms of my my boundaries and my limits when it came to who I was, what I was capable of, what I was being asked to do, how you know, like what I had going on creatively was in ways unfortunately being taken advantage of because I didn't see my full potential or meet my needs in the same way, having had other systems of support which were no longer available to me or had so severely shifted. those that I shared a lot of intimate and vulnerable space with, when it came to my truths and my story, my person as a non-binary trans person of color, I was just not being fully seen. And I needed to be as transparent about what I was needing from my life and what was going to sustain me. So
I don't think you're the only person that's reassessed and reprioritized during this time period.
No
And I'm
kidding.
glad that you did. Anyone else have any comments about how their anger is either working for them or maybe they've worked to shed it?
I think that for me, I was really, 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 really angry for for a long time of it. And then luckily, with the quarantine and stuff like that, me and Shannon, we went and got our instructor's permit, where that actually was it was a really good thing for me. I was able to take my anger and get busy doing something I can learn and turn around and teach to people, because that was always my biggest thing, was that all my friends are out there getting guns now and they didn't know what to do about it, much less they didn't know the laws, and they weren't going anywhere. Nobody was telling them how to make things work or how to be safe, you know and that's always been one of my things, is I like to take care of people. I like to protect them, you know what I mean? And seeing so many people so angry that they just didn't care, and they were going to just any lengths possible, not only to stay safe, but to just be heard. And I think that what happened with my anger is that I think it turned more into like I don't know if it's compassion or whatever, but it was one of those feelings where it's just like, I totally get what you're feeling, because I totally feel it too, but we can't stay here, because if we sit here in this anger, then it's just, everything's just going to keep exploding, and there's not going to be any growth. And the only way that we're going to grow is by loving one another, by taking care of that stranger that I didn't know yesterday or 5 minutes ago, but hey, let me help you out right now, so my anger ended up got channeled into something more along the lines of, let me do what I can to help you, and so that's where I'm at.
I love that. And that actually leads me to, Kimmy and Shannon. I am so interested in what you do. I think it's fascinating. I advocate for representation in venues, right? The idea that marginalized people are going to feel more comfortable in a space if there's actually people that look like them. And people in security positions obviously need to have a victim-centered approach when dealing with incidents of harassment and keeping the peace. Shannon, I'd like to know, how do you talk about these ideas or the need for your services, even with potential clients that maybe don't experience harassment themselves and don't see the need for a specialized kind of service like yours?
I mean, I think that's changing, because pre-COVID, I feel like I've been having these conversations with venue owners and management and staff for my entire career as a promoter and DJ. And it's like, you can have these conversations till you're blue in the face and they kind of listen. But now with, everybody heard the anger, right? So now these venue owners and club owners, they're scared because money talks. And if people aren't going to go to their venues, then they're not going to make any money. So I feel like that's put pressure on the venue owners a bit to reassess what their security situations look like. Because I could sit there and have a whole training and education hour with the security staff that was just getting ready to work an event. These like cis dudes are just so set in their ways. They didn't understand. I felt like they halfway listened, and didn't take things very seriously. And my hope is that now venues owners are going to take this stuff seriously and reassess what's security looks like at your club. So it's super important to have, like you were saying, people that look like you or people that are within like your demographic to be seen and greet you at the door and be the one to have a talk with you and take the victim stance. So more often than not, we haven't seen that in the past. And I would love to see that change.
Yeah. Ryan, through Events by Lady K, you basically create a safer space wherever you go, which I love. What are some of the first steps you usually suggest to a venue to become a safer space?
It depends on the event to an extent. I would say in the broadest lens, looking at, again, how many people can we serve with this shift, right? So gender neutral restroom is my favorite example to use, because it not only helps folks like myself, genderqueer person, right? Non-binary folks like Ro, folks in larger bodies, folks with disabilities. It helps people who have a medical need, right? Change a bandage, do insulin. It helps, right? If it's an all family, all ages concert, it helps parents do a diaper change. For a small child, it helps caregivers do a diaper change for an adult caregiver, right? If they're a caregiver.
Frankly, if you want us to drink, we're going to need to use the bathroom at some point, right?
Right. And everyone just wants to pee in peace. And so that's one of those, like, it serves anyone. And who are you leaving out? Pretty much no one, right? Like, everyone has an all gender restroom in their home. Some people maybe have separate if you have a giant house, but that's not many of us. And I think when you start to apply that, like, how many people can we serve with this intentionality isn't rocket science, right? It's just putting into practice, making sure that the impact matches the intent. So another example that we use is having a private space at a venue. It might be a dressing room. Right, for a performer. It might be a nursing room for someone who is a new parent. It might be a comfortable changing space for someone. It might be somewhere for an introvert to just go have a minute of alone time. For folks on an autism spectrum or sensory awareness, it's also just a moment to, like, have that decompression space. Depending on the time of your event, it can be a prayer space, a meditation space, something that, again, meets the needs of many people. So it's kind of like, what are the goals of what you're hosting? Is it to bring people together for a show? Is it to do a training? Another easy place is food and beverage, right? So if your venue has liquor, are you also offering non-alcoholic options beyond water, ideally? Right? And, like, are you charging for those? Are you not? Like, what is your version of hosting? For food, menu planning goes a long way to just from the start think about having something that is vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, nut-free. Like, the more people you can accommodate by some of the simple choices, it makes some of those last minute moments feel like less of a scramble when someone does come up and be like, ow, I have a really, I've got an allergy to wheat. Do you have anything gluten-free? They're like, yeah, we've already got it on the menu. You're all taken care of. It then makes people feel like you were being considered, right? And again, like I said, the only way you know is to ask. And so I think through especially in this reopening time, like, as people are checking out and getting a ticket, whether it's a concert, whether it's a conference, asking people, do you need accessibility needs, right? Because at a concert, as someone who wears heels, sometimes it is nice to find a chair, right? Like, have a seating section.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, for accessibility purposes, some people just can't stand for that long. Or if you happen to be in a wheelchair, you can't see at a lot of places. So, like, how are you factoring out accessibility seating, accessibility spaces in viewing ways? Are you offering ASL nights? Are you offering a closed caption? Any other services? Like, just asking in an open-ended text box can be a great way to learn what some of your people are seeking. And then sometimes there has to be money and action behind those requests.
I hope people are taking notes. That is a lot of great practical advice for how to put these. Obviously, you can hire Ryan too, but we can all do this ourselves, y'all. Ro, you're a musician. what are your unique safer space needs, or what do you expect from a place that calls itself a safer space?
Well, one thing that I think has come up quite a bit when we've been discussing in the Safer Spaces initiative is a space that's committed to the training and continued training on harm prevention, active bystander intervention, inquisition as an active bystander, how to do that for staff, but also, I mean, ideally, like at some point we would have some form of community-based accessibility to bystander harm prevention, and sustaining, and that's what really goes into sustaining a safer space for previously harmed folks. A space that also advertises its commitment to creating a safer space at every turn, and not just like a like a little something in the green room. Like, it needs to be in the green room, a large poster behind the bar, a poster in the bathroom, absolutely. Even in like the venue's office, realistically, I mean, we need it everywhere, and it can look cool, but it's gotta like get to the point and tell everyone that like this is something that we're doing and we're going to continue to commit to do, and take it 100% seriously, to create community within returning patron circle, to how our community comes to trust the venue, because it really comes down to, can we trust the staff? Can we trust the artists that you're billing? Can we trust the people in our community that have, like either are friends with those who have become, like who have harmful to some folks, potentially their well-being, and then how does the venue take action to make those folks, make everyone feel like they belong to be there and can have a good time and really enjoy the space the way that I assume every venue owner would want from a Saturday night. So
Right. Ro, have you experienced any backlash for advocating for safer spaces?
I don't think, not in recent memory. I guess, in some ways I've certainly, like outside of music, potentially, like tried to advocate for at like other jobs and other places that I've had maybe a leadership position above me, that, or like someone that was able to take more direct action than I felt comfortable, to prevent further harm. And the general rhetoric is like, we've handled it, we can handle it. It's in our, it's in our will to make it kind of go away. And the reality is that they're not asking like, what can we do for you? How are you okay? How are you like, I'm not those questions aren't always asked, and they're really important to ask for that person, and not just like a quick short-term reassurance band-aid that could, in theory be as easily ripped off. The reality is that it needs to be, every like statement needs to be taken with a like, how can we help the survivor? How can we help those that have been harmed? And there's certainly been some spaces where that has been harder to advocate for, in my experience.
I am curious. This is especially for Kimmy and Shannon and Ryan, but open to you as well, Ro. But I'd love to know, what are some of the common excuses you've heard from people that refuse to take harassment seriously, or take requests for safer spaces seriously, better policies. I'm also very happy to hear any weird or funny excuses, because I think we do have to laugh about this stuff when we can. But I'd love to know what odd things you've heard. Shannon, yeah.
I know I've had had issues with problematic owners of venues, and promoter, I will call them, used to be friends of mine, doing events for them in a space that the problematic owner owns, being sexually harassed big time, and them not doing anything about it, them looking at me going, what do you want me to do about it? When the owner was part of it. And the owner has multiple venues and spaces that people throw events at. So people are real quick to be like, I'm really sorry that happened to you, da da da, but I'm not going to lose my capital by not doing events at this person's venues. So that's something that I have definitely run into, because in the Twin Cities, an owner can own multiple venues and the general public just doesn't know. They don't know who owns what spaces. I know a lot of it, but the general public doesn't. So it's really, that's hard, you know?
Ryan, do you have anything in mind?
The biggest excuse I feel like I hear regularly is money, that it takes too much money. Sometimes it takes too much time. To come back to the restroom example, like people are like, we can't build one in, like, you know, the number of people we can fit in, it dictates that. I will say that you can also create an all gender restroom over the top of one of your restrooms, especially if your show is going to be a lot of queer folks, right? Like tape up a sign. Minnesota law supports it, for the record. You can do your own research. And it happened, like Flip Phone Events does it all the time when they host stuff at First Ave. So it's like, it is possible. People do it. So like, don't use money as the like, well, we couldn't possibly. What? You're creative folks. What can you do to creatively solve the problem, right? Like, oh, you know, this training is too expensive. Well, you've figured out how to pay a headliner a lot of money to come in and sell a lot of tickets. Like, make this investment too, because it will bring people back time and time again. It will encourage other people to want to rent your space for their space. That's something we absolutely stay on the lookout for when we're selecting spaces, right? It is, what do you have baked in, built in, and what are you not addressing to eliminate excuses, right? Proactively problem solving is a great thing, again, to just make it work.
I think there are so many things people can do for free. And as a performer, if you really want to dock us $10 to get that fancy printed sign taped to the bathroom, fine, it's worth it. We'll bring our own signs, maybe. I think we can all agree. At some point, you might hear my dog, by the way. I'm sure that's true for everyone working from home. There's pets all over the place. Yep, there she goes. Okay. But other than that, other than her protecting me, I think that we can all agree that as communities get better at preventing harm and dealing with harm in the moment, it doesn't necessarily make handling harm after it's occurred any easier. Kimmy, does that ring true for you in your community? And if so, what do you think we should be doing about it? What are we missing?
It's funny because I actually this last weekend, one of the venues that I'm working at, there was a group. I think it was called the Show Up Squad, and it's a group of survivors, sexually assaulted survivors, and they show up at these venues and everything to kind of promote healing and awareness that there's survivors out there showing up at these clubs and everything like that. And so we had a conversation, and it's a little bit tricky, because here's the thing: when you go into a venue, how do you know somebody's a survivor and somebody's a predator? I mean, you're walking in, it's, you know, everybody's having a good time. You don't know that. I mean, yes, like I can pretty much guess when I see behaviors or mannerisms, et cetera, but not everybody's going to know that. So the best
But
way,
statistically, we should probably assume, right, that there
I
are
would,
plenty of
I would
victims.
say, yeah, I would say like 100% of females or female identifying people generally have been abused. And there have been a great number of males that have been abused also, you know. I mean, I would almost say it's safer just assume everybody's had to suffer some sort of abuse in their life at some point or another, and then walk in with de-escalation and compassion as the first tools of engagement. You know, one of the things that I do that works for me is that I'm at that front door, and when people are coming into that venue as guests, I'm there and I'm greeting them, but not just like, hey, can I see your ID? I'm like, you know, you look way under 20, need the ID, come on now. But, you know, you have fun with them. You treat them like their family, like their friends, you know, you build that atmosphere that, thanks for coming over to my house. You know, if you got a problem, come talk to me because I got your back. And then the next step would be that when somebody goes up and says something to you, that you need to validate it. It doesn't matter what they're saying. You need to validate it. Because it's not you. You know, maybe you won't feel like that, but maybe they do. You know, maybe they're going to feel better if you, hey, do you want to hang out with me for the next hour or something like that? Make sure that nobody bothers you. I'm totally fine with that. You know, you gotta validate it, and sometimes validating is just being there for them. You know, it's very, very hard to, because one of the worst things that can happen to a survivor who's having something triggering to them is to be thought that they're just crazy, to be like, oh, I'll just brush them off, you know, to make them feel like they don't matter, you know, because I can guarantee you they will never come back to that place because that was an awful experience for them. And if you're going to make everybody's experience fun and safe, you're going to have to validate, be there, and back up anybody who says that they're in need, whatever it is.
Yeah. Now, abuse and harm can happen anywhere. I think as a punk rocker, I often have to remind people that it can happen in any genre of music. It can happen in any art form, right? Not even just music. These are behaviors that people learn over time. They get better at it over time without being held accountable to the point where real harm is done. And most likely that person doesn't know of a different way to be at that point. Ro or Ryan, what do you think accountability looks like after harm has been caused?
Believing victims first and foremost, absolutely. And then for venues, asking victims of harm or those who have, you know, the courage to share their stories, what they need, what action they need taken, for, you know, for venue staff. I think actually, Shawna, you mentioned this yesterday when we were talking, the three possible options. Like, what can we do? Do you want us to talk to them? Do you want us to just kind of keep an eye on them, observe them? Yep, from the book. Or do you want us to ask them to leave? And I think that really fully encompasses in a venue or event type situation what listening to someone who has experienced harm looks like. And you know, I also, you know, realistically within our community, those that are close to those that have been accused of harm, starting to have conversations with those folks about what in their, you know, what they feel is maybe a comfortable action for them, but not for somebody else. But also, you know, maybe even more specifically, the cases in which those folks close to them have seen them maybe take positions of power within a vulnerable space or invading another person's space. And the way that they have conversations. It's really important that they continue to have conversations, but also be a part of the greater community by having that person's back in you know, in such a way that they are able to purvey those spaces and start to be trusted within the community again, and be someone that people feel more comfortable around, or venues are more comfortable allowing back into spaces where maybe they are more aware of the harm that has been caused.
Ryan, what does accountability look like for you? Have you seen any successful accountability processes in your experience?
Accountability in a lot of our work looks like action. An apology for not being able to include someone, and not getting the interpreter that you said you would book, not having food available, not having accessible seating. Those are most of the things that we often deal with. And the words are nice, and it is the action of like, next time I come to this event, next time you host this gathering, what does that look like? I think it also goes into that, again, taking responsibility. Like, the apology is great, but like, what are you going to do about it? I think Ro rocked it out, so I got nothing more to add.
She did rock it out. Speaking of Ro, back to you. I think, no, generally, I think it's easy for us to get bogged down in the negative when we do this kind of work, right? And so I want to talk about people that are doing something right, or success stories. What do you see in your community that's going right? And Ro, you mentioned we actually spoke yesterday. You are a member of a newly formed group called the Safer Spaces Initiative, and I was a guest at your meeting last night. But let's start here. Tell us about this group and what you're doing and what you're planning for the future. And then I want to hear from everyone else. What else is going on in your town that we can look forward to and be excited about?
Yeah, so so the Safer Spaces Initiative is really kind of in its infancy at the moment, determining how we can best serve the Minneapolis, St. Paul, Twin Cities community when it comes to how we not only prevent harm, sustain safe spaces, but then the follow-up that comes along with maintaining that safer space, and having kind of a universal standard when it comes to how venues respond, and hold themselves accountable as staple parts, community spaces in our community. We're kind of working through where we're best served in terms of how we continue to support that vision, when it comes to the way that we create that baseline understanding of what accountability and harm prevention looks like. And we've been super honored to have you, Shawna, give us a lot of insight. Yesterday was phenomenal, but really, it's a lot of great minds in the Twin Cities that are coming together to have experienced all levels of this conversation, and want to see those needs being met by a community that has been kind of torn asunder when it comes to the way that people feel safe in events, at shows, spending time with other folks in their community, period, and in their circles. I've been really glad to see there's a lot of virtual venues popping up in the Twin Cities, which has been super amazing, because it is pretty much as accessible as it can get when it comes to hosting an event, or sharing space with other people. Something that is both available on your own, but also can be shared with other folks in the community that you are comfortable with, and maybe the comfort of your own home. Places like Aunties and Fantasy are really, I mean, it's amazing to see, these Black femme owned spaces starting to pop up in our eyesight in terms of the way that we start to see shows and music and art promoted. There's a lot more more Black owned businesses starting to develop events that are, to project Black joy and give space for a community that is, demographically smaller. So there are a lot of give and take when it comes to, or there is a lot of give and take when it comes to how many people, like how those people interact, how we interact with each other and hold space for each other and allowing for that to happen. It's shifting so deeply, and I'm really excited to see that more often, more frequently.
That's great. Shannon, what are you excited about right now?
I'm excited for people to change their mentality around nightlife. Like I'm 45 years old, and I've been in this business since I was 18. So always coming up in a dude's world,
Do you feel like you've seen a cultural shift though in that time, that it is getting better?
Like slower than baby steps.
Right, not fast enough, of course.
No, and it's like Ryan was saying, like there's so many things that can actually be achieved. Like it all these little things together, all these little pebbles make this huge rock that holds it to be a safe space. And it's like all the obstacles that have been in the way in the past, maybe this is the push that was needed to like make it actually happen. So I'm excited for that, and I hope that all these venues and these owners, these management teams, like follow through with things.
Kimmy, is there a local business or organization you think doing good work that you want to spotlight?
Yeah, the Hook and Ladder. They have been doing this music under the canopy for the rest of the summer. They got and it's great because they have just like a wide range of local artists, that are they're showcasing and everything like that. So it's pretty inclusive. It gives me an opportunity to be able to meet a bunch of new people, and I have had so many dad jokes just thrown out there. It's been awesome. No, but yeah, I mean that's it. I also gotta add on to what Shannon was saying too. One thing that I really I feel like that the climate, the atmosphere has been changing. We've had so many people, businesses inquiring about services just because they recognize that what they've been doing is not going to be working this time, and so we've gotten a lot of people. We got real estate agents calling us up asking us to give them training classes, on just how to approach people, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's sad that so many people had to hurt, but I've always said if it doesn't affect you, why would you change it? And I think this last year has affected such a great number of people that there's space being made to look at different ways, that are going to be more workable for everybody, hopefully. So yeah, I'm super happy about the dad jokes.
I'm sure everyone that hears them is too. Ryan, who are you excited about right now? Who's doing good work? Obviously, other than all of you, you're all doing good work. Let me give you all props, of course, but who else can we shine a light on?
Absolutely. I think folks that I've learned a lot from, right, do really big like organizational culture, like just radically shifting a worldview work that I think everyone needs, right? Like team dynamics, Best Emski, Imagine Deliver, the woke coach. Like, again, learning about who you are, what you don't know. We only know what we know. And I think continuing to do our own work and will help us meet other people where they're at in whatever whatever scenario that might be out in the world, right? Like treating people with dignity and respect. Who knew that the bar was so low and people still continue to miss it time and time again? So it is the like how to take some of these overwhelming, oh my gosh, like everything is on fire, right back to the rage question, right? Like how to turn some of the anger into action in a feasible, tangible, compassion focused way. So those groups, those folks, I think are changing the world one heart and then one mind at a time. So check them out if you're stuck in your journey in a bigger way.
Now, I have one last question for all of you before we get into Q&A from the audience. I'd like to end with a vision for the future. So, Ryan, I'll stick with you. What does a community full of safer spaces feel like?
This is such a great question. And I feel like it's the world that we're all trying to work toward, right? For me, it looks like people being able to be their most authentic selves in an everyday, uneventful way, right? Like it feels like such a rare occurrence for so many of us who are other. In one aspect, multiple aspects of our lives, to be able to fully participate, right? The status quo, like Kimmy was saying, has left so many people behind. It has not worked for everyone already because it was designed for a very specific group of white, cis-bodied, straight men, right? So like how we can continue to shape that, shift that, so that we all get to show up with our multifaceted, complex selves, right? It's beyond the, I don't see color. No, you should see color because it's a brilliant, beautiful, powerful part of people, right? You should see gender, you should see age, you should see ability and disability, because these are things that matter to people in a big way. These are the differences that make a difference, and they should be celebrated instead of like, oh, but we can't talk about it. I feel like especially in Minnesota, the Minnesota nice can turn into Minnesota ice real fast. And so
I haven't heard that before.
Yes.
That's lovely.
And so, right, I think the ultimate space is where everyone can actually show up and be them in the loudest, best, brightest way that they possibly could be, and that it doesn't feel like, oh, this is the only time I ever get to do this in a year, right? Or sometimes multiple years go by before this feeling happens. So I'm excited for chasing that.
Kimmy, what does a community full of safer spaces feel like?
Acceptance and willingness, I think, for me. Everybody would just being accepting of everybody else, not having to have a reason to be okay with something, just accepting it and just being willing to be there, to be present, to show up. That's, I think that's, that's what community is for me.
Shannon?
God, everyone before me just said everything really beautifully. So all those things. And I think I would just add on to that, having hard conversations, perhaps about overindulgence at adult cocktails, behavior, and everyone being on the same page of what consent looks like. I think that's such an important piece, because I honest to God don't think everybody understands what true consent is. So I think there needs to be a lot of education around that. In a perfect the perfect world, if we had all these safe spaces, we would all understand consent on the same level, you know.
And Ro, what about you?
Well, it's certainly hard to be like coming after all of that because I 100% agree with each and every one of you in terms of the ways that we, you know, continue to make those spaces less othering and purvey like a sense of, or at least, you know, like have a prevailing sense of of naturalness to the way that you know, going out feels like, you know, what that feels like should be comfortable, should be safe, should be full of, I mean, you should be excited to go out, right? Like you should be excited to be there and be a part of everything going on, but also the ability for, you know, this deconstruction of the hierarchy that happens when it comes to you know, positions of power, when it comes to, you know, like an idol of like a person that you hold or that your community holds in great regard for their work that they've been doing or their art that they've been creating for so long. You know, a bar owner's friends, staff's friends, to, you know, patrons, to like intoxicated patrons. Like, you know, you want to be able to say to all of those people, I hear and believe you. What can we do for you as a community, not just as someone above that person, but as a person.
I love it. This was my sneaky way of seeing if all of our definitions of safer spaces, see how they overlap. And they absolutely do. I heard just acceptance. I heard hearing people, seeing people for who they are, learning things like boundaries and consent, the things we didn't learn in school. And really, I love, Ryan, what you said about just being like no big deal, nothing every day, like uneventful. Wouldn't that be nice as a marginalized person to go about your day and nothing eventful happens, you know? And I think that's what we're all shooting for. And I will fight till my last breath for the right of everyone to enjoy equal access to leisure time. And so I hope that this conversation has helped anyone listening to figure out maybe how they can do that in whatever circles they're in, whatever their role or responsibility is. There is plenty you can do, even on the cheap, even free, to make everyone feel more welcome and respected and safe in your space. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Jade for Q&A. Thank you so much for having me and us. Thank you all, panelists. You're so beautiful. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you for the conversation. It's been great.
Yeah, I just want to keep that thanks going. Thank you to Shawna Potter and Ro and Ryan and Kimmy and Shannon for such a wonderful conversation about supporting safe music spaces in Minnesota, and not just music spaces. I think it kind of touched on spaces just in general. So thank you all for that. And at this point, we are going to do a short Q&A section. So if you do have any last minute questions that you have, feel free to toss those into the Q&A. And don't forget that we're going to have another song from Mayda coming up for you in just a couple of minutes. So stick around for that. But I do still have a couple of questions for the panel that have already come through. And again, feel free to keep submitting your questions into the Q&A box. And you still have that option to share your questions anonymously if you would like to. So first, I mean, I feel like we kind of touched on this a lot, but since we were doing kind of that big picture takeaway, I thought for the people who were still here, the folks watching tonight's event, and maybe the people listening to it later on, what is one thing that you really hope that people take away from this conversation about supporting safe spaces? And maybe Ro, you can start us off.
I think it's important that our community becomes familiar with the role that assertion of power plays into harassment, and the way that we start to do research on our own as a community about how can I be someone who sees something and says something. How can I, be at a show and inquire without invasion of personal space to show that I care, that I'm there, and that I'm here to be supportive of our community as a whole, music enjoyers, venue goers. The layman in the situation has the ability to create that change that we're talking about, and I think it's important that we, as individuals, just going out, understand that, feel that, and know how they can help.
Yeah. Shannon, I'm wondering, when people come to you and Kimmy with Sequeerity and they ask, you to come into their venue or maybe their private group, what's kind of the first thing that you open with or that you start with them?
Actually, I would leave that to Kimmy, because Kimmy's going to be the person on the ground chatting with them.
Yeah, usually depending on what kind of venue, if we're going in and there's already house security, then the first thing I would usually do is have a meeting and talk about pronouns and not misgendering people and how to approach somebody that you're unsure of, just so that everybody on that staff from that moment on, I knows, and then if they screw up, then I know that they screwed up and they shouldn't have, or whatever. Um, yeah, that's then the first thing. And then right after that, usually I spend a little bit of time just watching how they work their venue. Does does all the staff participate in doing security, keeping an eye out for everybody? Or is it just one or two people doing security and nothing else? Do their security, are they bar backs too? Are they supposed to be watching the dance floor while clearing off tables for the next customer? That doesn't sound like they're doing much work there, or not the right type. So those are the things that I always look for first. I always have a conversation. Um, I always watch to see how they actually operate. And then I talk to their manager and let them know that these are things you need to change. These are things that are going to get you, on that call out list in a heartbeat. Um, and then if they're willing, some of them are willing to listen, some of them aren't. I've gone into places where within 15 minutes I'm like, you need to kick this guy out because he's harassing women, and the manager's like, oh, he comes in every week, once a week we kick him out. Why is he still coming to your bar? I've been at other venues where their security stays behind a curtain and never looks at the main floor, and I'm like, get new security. They suck. Sorry. But yeah, so that's the first thing that we generally do is work with the staff to make sure the staff is all on page and that they're operating at the same level, helping one another out. That's really going to be the biggest thing that works for most of these venues. If we're coming in as security, we have a code of conduct. Basically, this is how we treat every single person when they come in, regardless of anything. It's just flat across the board. This is how I expect the managers to behave. If there's a situation and I need to make a call, you need to back me up. And if you're not, you know what? We're not going to work with you because that's not going to work for us. And then I think more than anything else, the one thing I make clear with every single, whether it's a producer, the managers, or an owner, is that I'm not there for them. I'm there for my community. I'm there to make sure that the people that are my people, that are coming in to spend money here for you, they're going to be safe. And if they're not safe, that's when we have to reassess the whole thing.
I love that. Just the arms out, Kimmy, that you have. I already feel welcomed in the space. Ryan, I do have kind of a similar question from the Q&A for you. And that is, when you first walk into a space that has hired you, what are sort of the ground level things that you need to be taken care of as well?
Many of them, again, come back to the goals of the event. So if we're staying in the concert performance world, it would be what can we preemptively problem solve? So how can we support traffic flow to avoid bottlenecks, which is a great thing because then it helps people enjoy their evening. From an accessibility perspective, it also then helps people feel like they can maneuver freely and autonomously. Anytime there's too long of a lines intersecting, anyone who does not easily maneuver a space, again, those with larger bodies, those with disabilities, it creates extra anxiety, extra stress for them to not be able to do that. We take a look, if we're helping with content, right? It's about who's on stage, who's on the lineup. This is something before you show up to the day of, but in that planning, right? It's about authentic inclusion, representation, not tokenization. So it's looking at who is represented, who's not, right? Across the range of identities of age, sexual orientation, race, gender, ability, geography, depending, right? Like many factors, like who, just like the staff who are working there, who are you having on stage, and how will your audience be able to see themselves on the stage? I think similarly with, working with the venue staff in the ways that Kimmy already brilliantly outlined, right? Like, we're setting the tone for this night. Here's how we expect folks to be treated. Here's how we want scenarios to be handled if there is a conflict, right? Like, what's the dynamic? How are we handling this? The first response is not to call 911 unless, medical emergency. Who is being viewed as a threat or not? So many, like, what are some of our, emergency protocols? It's outlining all of those. We're a big fan of multiple levels of signage, having floor clings, having things above people's heads so you can know where the bathrooms are, where the refreshment line is, where the exits are, because you have to for fire code, but everything else feels a little like choose your own adventure. Have you been there before? Right? Like, how are you welcoming people into the space that they feel like they can be there, be themselves? Yeah, all of those things and everything everyone else said already.
I know it does feel like things are being repeated, but I think it's important that some of these things are repeated so that it can kind of get into everyone's mind. I wanted to go back to Shawna because you literally wrote the book. There's the idea of organizational accountability. This is the question, but focusing in on individual accountability. And can you think of a time when you witnessed a single person make a space or a situation safer through their individual action, and what impact did that have?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I think it's something that I talk about in the van with my band when we're on tour. We try to always brush up on bystander intervention and crisis response so that we're ready in case someone on our show needs something. And, we don't really want to rely on the venue because we don't know these venues. We don't have that trust built yet, and so it's something that I know that I've done and I've seen my bandmates do, as well as people I've trained. But I think the specific example that I'm coming to is one where I was on tour and a friend of mine came to the show. And when a certain person walked in, my friend immediately said, "Oh my God, there she is. I can't deal with this right now." I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know the history, but in that moment, it didn't matter. And so I went immediately into crisis response mode and just said, "What do you need right now? Do you want to hang out behind the merch table? Do you want to go to the bathroom with me? Do you want to leave and I can walk you out? What do you need right now?" And I just gave her a couple options. And she said, "Yeah, I want to go to the merch table. I want to go behind the merch table." I said, "Okay, let's go behind the merch table." And we just walked back there and we had our little That little table kind of served as like her physical barrier that made her feel safer with this person who obviously made her uncomfortable. And so it's a choice. I realize that's a story about myself, which, hey, I'm an only child. I guess that's what's going to happen. It's also, I also have a terrible memory, so that's all I can remember. But it really can be that simple to make someone go from uncomfortable to comfortable. Is, hey, are you good? One, you start there. Like if they haven't said anything, just, hey, are you good? Give them a chance to say, actually, no. And then say, okay, let's see what we can do about that. And you just decide what's within your power in that moment, because no matter what, every single person has something they can do, right? And your role will be different if you're in the audience, if you're on the stage, if you work there, if you're on tour, whatever, if you know the person, if you don't, but there's still something you can do. And so offer what you can, offer what makes sense, what's reasonable, and then let them decide so that they can retain the power in that choice and feel like they have some agency when it really feels like it just got taken away from them.
We have a couple more questions from the audience here. And one of them, I think, goes back to a lot of the conversations that we were having tonight. And it asks that, well, it talks about a lot of the work to make safer spaces is grassroots and happens on a venue by venue or community by community basis. What opportunities do you see for similar efforts on a larger scale? You know, thinking about it regionally or nationally or even internationally, how can we take these grassroots ideas, I guess, and do them large scale? And Ryan, I see you nodding your head. So maybe let's start with you.
Sure, I can kick it off. I think part of it is aligning yourselves with a code of conduct, right? To use Sequeerity's words. I think there was a lot of momentum and coalition building during COVID after George Floyd was murdered, right? Like people were like, we have a racial justice statement, like we have a COVID safety plan. Like I think leveraging some of those networks that exist now that have become a support structure for so many to continue using those as a way, like, cool, you're part of this network, like join ours, sign onto this solidarity statement that this is how we expect you to behave. This is how we expect action to be taken. And, you know, the people who aren't on that list will get to be noticed. So there's an element of peer pressure. There's an element of like, people should want to do it because it's the right thing to do. And, you know, that clearly hasn't been a motivating factor for, unfortunately, too many people, places, and spaces. But I think that could be a great way, right? Tapping into the Minnesota Live Events Coalition, the Live Event Coalition broadly, the Save Our Spaces, Save Our Stages kinds of organizations that have done a lot to bring groups together, I think can do a lot to further collectivize these ideas, these philosophies, these practices in very tangible ways.
And let me say, I am happy to formalize my Safer Space program into a national scale. So if y'all know those higher ups, write me the grant. Y'all, I'm ready. I am ready to teach America how to create safer spaces wherever they go.
I like it. Hired. If I was the hiring person, already done. Ro, kind of the same question to you, since I know that you're a part of a grassroots initiative that's trying to, you know, collectivize some of the voices here in Minnesota. The Safer Spaces initiative is, I guess, how do you take that grassroots idea and make it large scale?
I think it's important, especially while a lot of those organizations are starting to mobilize on those ideas when it comes to you know, how they support safer spaces and venues, to also take a realistic approach on what they're able to handle with their mission in mind, and seeking other organizations that either fill in kind of the blank that they're either like not able to prioritize, or maybe some part of what those other organizations would love to be able to do but aren't able to do because of either the group's expertise or the way that the mission is worded, so that it, like just making sure that that vision of what everybody wants from safer spaces, venues, communities, becomes a stable foundation, to then continue to publicize that this is something a community is doing on a smaller scale, to then have another community do it on a smaller scale, to then uniform those ideas as, hey, we're both doing these things, and that would be great if we could do them together because we're really close. And like bridging those gaps between all of those spaces that have now unified on the vision of safer spaces.
We all do better when we all do better. We got one last question here. And since I've seen Shannon DJ at a ton of spaces, and Shannon always seems to have like the perfect song, let's talk music. What artists and songs do you listen to that really make you feel empowered?
Oh God, I listen to so many genres. Right now it's a lot of Megan Thee Stallion and French pop music. My wife turned me on to French, like amazing French music, so I've really been on that a lot. And yeah, a lot of Megan Thee Stallion.
We'll just go down the line. Ryan, what are you listening to feel empowered?
These days it's been a lot of Lizzo.
Is there a particular song? Is it just good as hell all the time, or?
It's not. That one is often on repeat. Yeah.
Shawna, what about you? What's your empowerment song?
It's definitely Beyonce. And also the ladies on like Pop Sugar workout videos that are like, you're doing so great. I know at home you're doing amazing. Whatever kind of day you're having, I have definitely teared up a couple times over the pandemic because they're so positive and encouraging. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but it is definitely true.
It's good if it gets you into the right space. Kimmy, what are you listening to feel empowered?
All right, so don't judge, okay? Because I like a lot of stuff, but Hanson, Mbop, and Wilson Phillips, hold on, because yeah, right in the heart. Come on. And Mbop just makes me happy.
It's the nonsense words. It's so good. And Ro, how about you wrap us up with a song that you've been listening to feel empowered?
I've been coming back to this record that was released just a couple months back, the Me Too Minneapolis compilation from a lot of our Minneapolis artists, Jor, Annie Mac, Lady Eliza, Mayda, all of those folks really put their heart and soul into this movement and the idea of banding together as a community and hearing those who have experienced harm. And it just feels good to the heart to listen to so many women and femmes that have felt that and want to reclaim the energy that has for a lot of us it was very cathartic. So it feels good to like have that catharsis with so many beautiful people and have it be a part of something special for our community and for others.
That's so wonderful. And you should note, if you're curious about that compilation that Ro just mentioned, you can find it in the chat. If you, one of the people watching this right now, have a song that you've been feeling empowered listening to, feel free to let us know so we can listen to it and feel empowered as well. And I just wanted to say thank you again to Shawna Potter and Ro and Ryan and Kimmy and Shannon for sharing this space, for taking the time to talk about how to make Minnesota music community safer and stronger. And thanks to you for joining us and for listening and for sharing your questions. LineCheck is made possible in part by the Minnesota Legacy Amendments Art and Cultural Heritage Fund and by the members of Minnesota Public Radio. LineCheck is presented by The Current and produced by Kelsey Brennan, Tom Campbell, and Cecilia Johnson, with support from David Safar, Ellie McKinney, and Bethany Sweet. Events like LineCheck strengthen the Minnesota music economy, and members make all of this possible. The Current provides a community-supported space where local artists can thrive and a variety of voices can be celebrated. Contribute to our creative ecosystem that sets our state apart when you donate at thecurrent.org. Next Tuesday, you should know, our next LineCheck, it's going to feature musician and co-founder of Voices in the Back, Anastasia Ellis. And Anastasia will be speaking with Minnesota musician and activist Maria Issa, Muju Messiah, and Mrdr. Plus, you get to catch a performance from Sounds of Blackness. So you can register for that webinar at thecurrent.org. And let's wrap things up tonight with another song from Mayda.
Your voice is a hurricane.